Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment. Welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today, we're talking with Del Lisk, Vice President of Safety Services at Lytx. Del, thanks for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jason. Looking forward to the interview.
Right, so Lytx made really cool announcement here recently about moving some AI powers into analyzing safety behavior, safety concerns within the cab, leveraging a lot of video, a lot of the AI. And I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. Really caught my attention. Very cool stats that you announced here. So I just want to dive into it and kind of get the behind the scenes look. Some of the things that caught my eye is you mentioned, or the announcement mentioned, that the technology better detects behaviors such as food or drink distractions and failure to stop, even cell phone or handheld device usage. How are you able to do this? How much of the video you're processing, and how are you able to identify that when all this stuff is streaming off the truck?
That's a great question. So maybe just a little historical background. So companies like ourselves that have been in the vehicle capturing video, driving video, traditionally the video has largely been triggered by accelerometers. So if there was a hard brake, a sudden swerve, a crash, it'd capture some video because of that sensor. But what's happened with technology, there's now the ability with machine vision, which is essentially, think of like your eyes. Machine vision sees things out on the roadway or in the cab. That paired up with artificial intelligence, which is kind of like the brain, like when we see and we think. Right. So that artificial intelligence is able to make decisions about what it sees to call out these things more effectively. And so in the old world, you would only capture video because, again, hard braking, a sudden swerve, maybe speeding would be another one. But in this new world, when you have intelligent machine vision and artificial intelligence, it's able to identify things like, hey, that's a stop sign. Hey, this guy's still going 9 miles an hour. He never stopped. So we're going to capture some video of that for a coaching opportunity. And likewise, in the cab, we know how dangerous cell phones and driving are, and unfortunately, there's still some people that do that. So that machine vision can identify, hey, that's a phone that's up by the person's head, or there's an object, and the artificial intelligence says, looking at our previous data, I'm 95% or more confident that that's a phone. I'm going to capture that video, flag it for the customer to coach the driver. And so that's kind of the technology piece. We've been in this business so long, we have billions and billions of miles of video that was reviewed by humans that we've been able to go back and use that information to train our algorithms to make that artificial intelligence very, very intelligent.
Right.
So that it's not noisy, so it's accurate.
Right. Do you, you mentioned the kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like the confidence rating or the percentage of how confident it is. Is that communicated to the fleet manager when the footage is shown, or is it an alert that comes through and they get to review the footage and see for themselves what it looks like?
That's a really interesting question I haven't asked before. So behind the scenes, our cameras are making that decision. I mean, it's going. If you put your hand up by your ear, it might say 30% likelihood it's a cell phone, 40%. It continues to evaluate it.
Right.
So what actually happens is behind the scenes, it's making those judgments, but until it hits a 95% confirmation, we don't even flag it for the customer. So they don't see the various gradations. We only send it to them when we're quite confident it's accurate. As you know, in the fleet business, no one has time to sit down and look at video that isn't meaningful.
Right, for sure. Well, and it's super interesting to me because you mentioned the hard braking instances, and we've seen a lot of instances of, okay, matching the video at that timestamp to the braking sensor, right? But this is pure video analysis and breaking down the image, and that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So given that machine vision, artificial intelligence, there was a lot of risk that in the accelerometer only world was only captured by coincidence. So if someone jammed on the brakes and happened to be on the cell phone, well, in that one instance, you've identified that that's someone that's using a cell phone. Mm-hmm. But with the machine vision AI, you can capture it every time that they're using a cell phone. So there's just you're more likely to identify a problem, and you're more likely to identify it earlier, so you can correct it. and obviously prevent a future crash.
For sure, for sure. So the other component of this, when we talk about cameras, that we always talk about is the driver impact, right? There is, it can be a hard sell of in-cab driver-facing cameras, and I have to be honest, I gotta say, because I just went through this just yesterday. I was lucky enough to have a test drive of a vehicle that for the week that had connected telematics, and being on the driver's side when you know the fleet manager pulls up the data and hear all the alerts, and you're sitting there. There is a sense from the driver's side of like I instantly got, I don't know, defensive. You know, I felt like I had to explain myself in all those little alerts, right? So now in bringing this added layer, which definitely is beneficial, what do you advise fleets to do in working with the drivers to make this successful and not push them away or feel like they're alienated with this technology?
Yeah. So first of all, what you described is a very common feeling. Now, fortunately, this technology is becoming so prevalent. I mean, we alone are in over 700,000 vehicles that many of our new clients, some percentage of their employees have had that system from a previous employer. So that, you know, the fact we're already out there quite a bit is making it easier.
Right.
Also, interestingly, the younger drivers are more accepting of it. I mean, the whole social media and all that stuff, they're just more comfortable with it. It's not as big a deal, but regardless, it's something that has to be addressed. So I like to refer to it as kind of the 3 Ws. So it comes down to communication, and then I'm going to call it the 3 Ws. And that is a matter of getting with your employees, the drivers, and explaining, first of all, what it is we're doing. So that is, you know, that's the technology. How does it work? What can it do? What can't it do? So they have an exact understanding of the technology, because many times they think it's more invasive than it really is. And just as importantly, it's critical, the second W is to explain why. So as we're sitting here, and if I told you, by the way, your employer is putting a camera in your vehicle, Jason, as you're in this interview, you probably didn't know it, but they are working on it right now. If you didn't know why they were doing it, you know, what's the purpose of it, it's going to create a lot of concern. So it's very important to explain why they're doing it. In most companies' cases, it's to prevent losses, to protect people, those sorts of things. It makes the business stronger. Stronger business protects people's jobs and all of that. And then the third one, and perhaps the most important, the third W is what's the win. In other words, what's in it for the driver. Now, every good employee certainly wants to make sure that it's good for the company, but we are who we are, and probably most importantly, they want to understand how it can benefit themselves.
Right.
And that's where it's so critical to just go through the exercise of helping them understand that if you're doing everything right and something bad happens, you know, a crash, someone else screws up and cuts you off while you're driving, that video is going to be there to protect you. The external, the forward view, road view is going to show what happened and, you know, who initiated the action. The inside view, even if you're doing everything right, well, it's going to help to protect against that other side claiming you were distracted or you were falling asleep. No, the inside view shows you were wide awake. So the 3 Ws, what are we going to be doing? Why are we doing it? And what is the win for you? Is how I would cover it.
Do you, in working with your customers and making this successful, is there a level of visibility that managers can give the drivers into the data? I mean, they're seeing all the alerts, they're seeing all the information. Obviously, the drivers are living it, right? But do you reckon, I mean, should the drivers see the same thing? Is there a level of visibility into that data they should highlight? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so transparency is a big piece of this. So for example, even when we started in 1998, even way back then, we realized that, for example, when the video was triggered to capture events, it was really important for the driver to know for 2 reasons. One, so that it doesn't feel secretive, but also most drivers don't really want to be on video. And if they come to understand that, gee, if I do this, it's going to trigger video. If I don't do this, there's no video. So that's what I'm going to do. So that transparency from that level to the driver is really critical. As far as sharing the data, sharing the video, every company has kind of their own culture about that. I think the companies that are running the program the best, with the best buy-in from drivers, are very transparent. Invite them to come on in, sit down. If you'd like, we can open up your profile in our interface and show you exactly what's being captured by you and in many cases, it's really good stuff, but they invite them to come on in.
Right, for sure. No, and that's a great point about the awareness of what triggers those alerts too. Even in my own experiences, I alluded to this week, hard braking or hard acceleration in that regard. Now, in my credit, at the time that we reviewed, I hadn't had any, but I knew that they were there, right? So even on the drive home, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I do that, someone's going to see it, and it just keeps you honest a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the goal here isn't to catch someone doing something wrong. It's to correct mistakes, whether they're intentional or not, so that they can become a safer driver. So when a mistake does happen, you want people to recognize it so that they can go, next time I won't do it that way.
Right. Right. Yeah, and then the onus is really on the fleet manager or the safety manager to kind of take a look at that information. Is this was it a hard stop because it was just a one-off? Sometimes you go a little heavy on the brake, or is it happening all the time? Cell phone usage is probably one of those things that maybe you want to just ping people on, hey, just a reminder, don't do this, because that is not a habit you want to form, right? That one's really dangerous.
Right, and that kind of, I think, to your earlier question about drivers, the comfort level with it, I think there's another piece here that you kind of touched on, and that is kind of how does management respond to what they see? Mm-hmm. So the wrong way to respond to it is with heavy discipline, heavy-handedness. That's going to turn people off on the program and give it a negative perspective. But instead, kind of what you described, if someone is identified doing the wrong thing, well, they were doing it before you put the video in the vehicle, probably more so, right? So this is just an opportunity to identify something that needs to change going forward. And breaking old habits, even a cell phone, those are, we've seen it with, if you have kids, I have kids, it's habitual, right? It takes a while to break an old habit. Right. And certainly it's an important one to change, but you have to have some patience. And for example, on the cell phone, you need to ask a few questions, because what if actually the cell phone is being driven by the fact that this person is out on the job, essential services, out on the road, they have a spouse at home with kids at home because of the whole school situation, the spouse has lost their job, so there's a lot of stress and they're concerned, there's right. The mitigating factors, so you need to understand more than just, hey, you're on your cell phone, put the phone down. There's more to it.
Right. No, that's a great point. I'm a manager. I also have children, and it's hard, right? It's hard to take a step back and take a deep breath and say, okay, what do I really need to do here, and how do I communicate that? Especially when the manager, him or herself, is facing the same kind of pressure. You know what I mean? Right now, it's super stressful time. We all just want to make sure we're pulling in the same direction, I think.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep.
Del, thank you so much for taking the time. Really insightful. Really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.